The tires crunched on the gravel as I pulled up to my cabin, 2 hours earlier than usual. I'd been gone for a week on a training assignment, and all I wanted was a quiet night by the fire. But as soon as I stepped out of my truck, I froze. Someone had parked a silver SUV right in front of my porch, and boxes were stacked by my door. A woman in a bright pink sweater stood there, arms crossed, yelling orders at 2 movers. "Put that couch inside! This place belongs to the HOA now!" she barked. I blinked, thinking I was hearing things. "Excuse me?" I said, walking closer. She spun around, eyes sharp like she'd been waiting for a fight. "You're trespassing! I'm calling the cops!" she snapped, pulling out her phone. I almost laughed. Almost. This was my property. I built this cabin myself, on land my father left me. "Ma'am, this is private land," I said calmly. "You might want to check your GPS." But she wasn't listening. She was already talking to the 911 operator, throwing in words like armed man and threatening behavior. My stomach sank. She wasn't just confused, she was dangerous. Within minutes, I could hear sirens in the distance. I kept my hands visible, not because I was scared, but because I'd been through this kind of chaos before. What she didn't know was that every inch of this property was under 24/7 surveillance. Front gate, porch, even the driveway she was standing on. As the police cars rolled up, she pointed at me and screamed, "That's him! He broke in!" The officers rushed toward me, hands on their holsters. I didn't move. I just looked straight at her and said slowly, "You sure you want to keep that story, ma'am? Because everything you just did is already on camera." For the first time, her confidence cracked. She blinked, confused, her phone trembling slightly in her hand. I could almost see the panic crawl up her face as she realized this wasn't going to end the way she thought. The cops hesitated, glancing between us. Karen quickly jumped in, her voice rising. "He's lying! I'm part of the HOA board and this property has unpaid dues. We're reclaiming it." Her words sounded official, confident, but completely fake. One officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have proof you live here?" I smiled slightly and reached into my jacket, slowly pulling out my wallet. "Yeah," I said, handing him my driver's license. "Check the address." The officer looked at it, then back at the cabin. His brows furrowed. "This matches." Karen's face went red. "That's impossible. The HOA president told me—" she started, but I cut her off. "Lady, this cabin isn't even under an HOA. The nearest neighborhood's 3 miles away." The officers exchanged looks. One of them stepped aside, calling dispatch to verify my name. Karen started pacing, mumbling about community regulations and new ownership. I just stood there, calm as ever, because I knew what was coming next. "Officer," I said quietly, pointing toward the porch. "If you'd like to make this simple, I can show you something." I walked up the steps, entered a code on a small keypad, and the big TV inside flickered on. The screen split into 6 live camera feeds. Front yard, gate, porch, driveway, inside. Every second from the last 48 hours recorded in high definition. And there it was. Karen's SUV pulling up that morning, her yelling at the movers, placing fake papers on my door. The officer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, you want to explain why you were trying to move into his house?" he asked. Karen stammered, looking around like she might run. "He abandoned it. Everyone knows that," she shouted, voice cracking. I leaned against the railing, watching her unravel. "Funny," I said, "because I was gone for 5 days, not forever." She froze. The silence that followed was heavy, until the officer's radio crackled. "Dispatch confirms property belongs to the man on site." The other cop gave me a nod, then turned to her. "Ma'am, you're going to need to step aside." And that's when Karen realized her little takeover was falling apart right in front of her. Karen's voice trembled now, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. "You don't understand," she said, forcing a laugh. "He's dangerous. He threatened me when I told him about the HOA rules." One of the officers frowned. "We just watched the footage, ma'am. He didn't threaten anyone." Her fake smile vanished. She looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes, like she couldn't believe her plan wasn't working. I kept my tone even. "You called the cops on the wrong guy." She turned toward the movers, desperate. "Tell them what I said. Tell them he was acting crazy." But the younger mover lifted his hands. "Ma'am, we were just doing what you told us. You said you owned the place." Her lips twitched, her face paling as she realized no one was backing her up. I folded my arms. "You forged HOA documents, tried to move into private property, and made a false report. That's a whole list of crimes, in case you're wondering." The lead officer nodded grimly. "We'll need those documents you posted on the door, ma'am." Karen hesitated, clutching her bag tight. "They're in my car," she muttered. But when she tried to move toward it, the officer blocked her. "Stay right here." She looked trapped now, like a cornered animal. "You can't do this," she shouted. "I know people in the city office." I raised an eyebrow. "That's great. Maybe they'll visit you in county jail." The officers exchanged a quick look. They were done being patient. One of them stepped aside and called for backup to verify the forged paperwork. Karen started to shake her head, muttering, "This isn't happening. This isn't happening." I took a slow step closer and said quietly, "You broke into the wrong house, Karen. You thought I was just another guy you could scare." I paused, letting the words hang in the air before adding, "You should have checked who I was before calling the cops." For the first time that night, she looked genuinely afraid. The backup unit arrived within minutes. 2 more patrol cars, lights flashing red and blue across the trees. Karen's face turned pale under the pulsing lights. One officer began collecting her fake HOA papers, while another took photos of the boxes she'd ordered to be moved inside. "You really thought you could just take this place?" I asked quietly. She avoided my eyes, clutching her phone like it could still save her. Then her tone shifted. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" she hissed. "Guys like you always hide behind fancy lawyers and fake papers?" I almost laughed. "Lady, I built this cabin with my own hands. You picked the worst man to mess with." The lead officer motioned to me. "Sir, can we take a look at that surveillance footage again?" I nodded and played it back on the screen inside. The video showed everything. Karen driving up, ordering the movers, sticking fake HOA repossession notice papers on the door, and even making that fake 911 call where she described me as armed and hostile. The officer's expressions hardened. "That's felony-level stuff," one muttered. Karen's head shot up. "Wait, you can't arrest me. I was just following orders from the HOA president," she cried out. The cop tilted his head. "And what's the name of this president?" She froze. He doesn't like to give out his name." That was it, the final nail. The officer shook his head. "Ma'am, turn around." When she didn't move, he repeated, firmer this time, "Hands behind your back." The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the quiet night. Karen tried one last time, her voice cracking. "You don't know who I am!" I looked straight at her and said evenly, "I don't have to. My cameras already do." As they led her toward the squad car, she glared over her shoulder. "This isn't over," she spat. I smiled faintly. "You're right," I said, nodding toward the flashing lights. "It's just starting. For you." She shouted again, but the sound faded as the door slammed shut. For the first time that night, the woods around my cabin went silent again, and I finally took a deep breath knowing justice had just started rolling. I watched the patrol car disappear down the gravel road, its red and blue lights fading into the darkness. The movers stood there awkwardly, glancing at me like they weren't sure if they should apologize or just leave. "You boys didn't know," I said calmly. "Next time, ask for proof before moving someone's stuff." They nodded quickly, mumbling apologies before driving off, leaving a pile of Karen's furniture sitting in the dirt. The lead officer turned back to me. We'll file the full report tonight. You'll get a copy by morning. She'll be charged with trespassing, falsifying documents, and making a false emergency call. I nodded, grateful, but still tense. Appreciate it, officer. That woman's been lurking around for weeks. I just never expected her to pull something this bold. He sighed. You'd be surprised what people do when they think no one's watching. When they finally left, I stood alone under the porch light. The night felt heavy, like the air itself was still holding on to the chaos. I glanced at the cabin's main screen again, rewinding the footage just to be sure everything was saved. And that's when I noticed something strange. At the far edge of the property, right before Karen arrived, another vehicle had stopped for a few seconds. The camera caught the headlights, but not the plate. I frowned. Who the hell was that? I whispered to myself. I zoomed in, but the frame was too dark. Whoever it was had waited until Karen got out, then drove away, almost like they were watching her, or using her. I stepped out into the yard, scanning the tree line. Nothing but the quiet hum of the night and the rustle of leaves, but something in my gut twisted. Karen was too bold, too sure someone had her back. I walked toward the gate, checking the tire marks on the ground, 2 sets, not 1. My voice dropped to a low murmur. Looks like this isn't over after all. Back inside, I shut off the porch light and locked the door, but the unease stayed with me. On the monitor, that mystery vehicle's lights flickered once more before disappearing down the road, as if promising that whoever was behind this hadn't played their last move yet. The next morning, the mist rolled through the trees like smoke, curling around my cabin's porch rails. I hadn't slept much. Every creak of wood, every snap of a twig outside made me glance at the cameras again. Karen was locked up, sure, but that other vehicle from last night kept replaying in my mind. Whoever was behind it didn't just stumble by. They were waiting. At sunrise, I brewed coffee and sat by the window. The woods looked peaceful, but I'd learned long ago that quiet places hide loud secrets. My phone buzzed, a message from the sheriff's office. Need you to come down. Karen's making new claims. I drove into town, the chill biting through my jacket. At the station, the sheriff met me with a tired look. You might want to hear this, he said, handing me a report. Karen was telling them she'd been hired by someone named Mr. Dalton, supposedly representing a land development company that claimed ownership of my property. I laughed under my breath. Dalton, never heard of him, the sheriff nodded. We ran the name. It's fake. But the company address she gave us belongs to a real firm in Denver, one tied up in some messy property disputes. He leaned back in his chair. Thing is, they've been buying out land near your area. Aggressively. The puzzle pieces started fitting together, cold and sharp. Karen wasn't acting alone, she was bait. They'd used her to test how much resistance they'd face. So they send a local troublemaker to move in, see if the owner backs down, I said slowly. And if I hadn't come home early, they'd have changed the locks by morning, the sheriff finished grimly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, I've got all their faces on tape, including the car that dropped her off. The sheriff gave a slow nod. Good, keep those cameras rolling, son. Something tells me they're not done with you yet. As I drove back toward the cabin, the unease deepened. The forest that once felt like home now felt like a watchtower. I caught myself glancing in the rearview mirror again and again. Somewhere behind those trees, someone was waiting for round 2. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun had started dipping behind the ridge, painting the woods in shades of gold and gray. I parked the truck and waited a moment before stepping out. The air was still, too still. My cameras had motion sensors that pinged my phone if anything moved near the house, but all day, nothing. Either the system glitched, or someone had figured out how to stay out of sight. I went inside, set my coffee down, and started checking the feed. 6 cameras, all clear, until I reached the one near the back fence. A flash of movement just a second long. I rewound it, slowed it down. There it was. A man in a dark jacket, hood up, walking along the fence line and stopping to look straight at the lens before the image cut to static. My pulse kicked up. That wasn't random. That was a message. I stepped outside, gun holstered at my side, eyes scanning the tree line. You picked the wrong property again, I muttered. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the back fence, every instinct alert. I saw fresh boot prints in the mud, bigger than Karen's, heavy tread, government issue. Whoever it was knew how to move quietly. Military or law enforcement, maybe? Then I heard it, a faint click like metal brushing metal. My hand went to my holster, but I froze when I saw the reflection of a small black drone hovering above the trees. It tilted slightly, as if it was watching me. Then it zipped away, vanishing over the ridge. I hurried back inside, pulled up the live feed again, but all I caught was a blur of motion in the sky. I sat back, jaw tight. This wasn't about property anymore. This was surveillance against surveillance. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number," I answered. A calm voice said, "You shouldn't have interfered, Mr. Hale. That cabin isn't yours anymore." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long second, then at the glowing cameras on the wall. A cold smile crossed my face. "Good," I whispered, "because now you've made it personal." The woods fell silent again after that call, so quiet it almost felt staged. Every instinct in me said to leave, but something stronger held me there, the need to know who was behind this. I locked every door, checked the generator, and turned off the cabin's main lights, leaving only the glow from the monitors. If they wanted a game of shadows, I'd give them one. Hours passed. Midnight crept in, and I was still watching the feeds when I caught it. A second vehicle, headlights off, rolling up the service trail that led to the back of my land. Not the same one from before. This was bigger, heavier. A black pickup, no plates. I zoomed in on the camera, my jaw tightening. 2 figures stepped out. One of them carried a flashlight. The other was holding something long, too straight to be a shovel. A rifle, maybe. I didn't move right away. I let the footage roll, recording everything. Then I grabbed the small control pad near the desk and activated the floodlights. The entire backfield exploded in white light. The men froze, shielding their faces. I stepped onto the porch, keeping my voice calm but loud. "Nice night for trespassing, huh?" They didn't answer. One turned and started toward the truck. The other raised his hand like he was about to say something, but before he could, the siren from my perimeter alarm started blaring. The one near the truck panicked, jumped in, and hit the gas. The tires spun, throwing dirt as the pickup tore off into the trees. The second man stumbled after it, shouting something I couldn't catch before the woods swallowed him too. I lowered the rifle from my shoulder. I hadn't fired. Didn't need to. Fear did the job, but when I replayed the footage, something hit me. The man who stayed behind for those few seconds had turned his face toward the camera, deliberately. He wanted me to see him. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. A scar running down his left cheek and a patch on his jacket. A falcon clutching a key. My stomach dropped. I knew that emblem. It belonged to Falcon Ridge Security, a private firm that used to contract for the military, the same company that had once tried to buy my father's land. I sat back slowly, the truth starting to take shape. Karen wasn't some random busybody. She was a pawn in something much bigger. And now I knew the kind of people who were coming next. Wouldn't be calling the cops. Morning sunlight cut through the blinds, thin and sharp like a warning. I hadn't slept. Every sound outside kept me on edge. The drip from the gutter, the creak of the porch boards, the faint hum of the generator. Falcon Ridge Security. Just hearing the name again brought a flood of old memories. Classified files, black ops missions, and a contract gone bad. Years ago, I'd blown the whistle on one of their illegal land grabs overseas. Looks like they hadn't forgotten. I brewed another pot of coffee and stared at the footage on the screen. The men's faces were clearer now. The one with the scar wasn't just muscle. He was Evan Dross, a former field lead for Falcon Ridge. He'd vanished from the company record 3 years ago after a federal probe. Now he was trespassing on my property. I made a copy of the footage and stored it on 3 different drives. One went in the safe. Another I hid under the porch. The third I planned to deliver in person. If Falcon Ridge wanted a fight, they'd have to work for it. Around noon, a sheriff's SUV pulled up outside. It wasn't the same deputy from before. This one was new, young, nervous. He stepped out slowly, hand resting on his holster. "Mr. Hale?" he called. "Yeah," I said, stepping out. "Sheriff sent me to check on you." "Said you had visitors last night?" "2 men," I said, handing him a flash drive. armed, not locals. I caught their faces on camera. He plugged it into his tablet, watched for a few seconds, then frowned. That's Falcon Ridge. They're supposed to be private security contractors. Private, I said dryly, until they want your land. Before he could respond, his radio crackled. Unit 4, we've got movement near the North Ridge. Black pickup matching your suspect's description. The deputy's eyes widened. That's barely 5 miles from here. I grabbed my jacket and keys. Let's go. He hesitated. You sure about that? Kid, I said, looking him dead in the eye, they've already been on my land once. I'm not waiting for twice. As we sped down the dirt road, I caught a glimpse of something through the trees, tire marks leading into a clearing, and faint smoke rising from what looked like a small camp. Falcon Ridge hadn't left. They'd set up right on the edge of my property line, and whatever they were planning next. It wasn't just about my cabin anymore. We parked the SUV a few hundred feet from the clearing and moved in slow. The forest was still, too still, the kind of silence that means eyes are already on you. Through the trees, I spotted it. A small camp, 2 tents, 1 black pickup, and a satellite uplink pointed straight at my cabin. They weren't just here to scare me. They were watching, recording, maybe even trying to hack my security feed. The deputy whispered, "What do we do?" "Record everything," I said, keeping my voice low. "No hero moves. Just proof." I raised my phone, zooming in, and caught the face of the man with the scar, Evan Dross. He was talking to someone over a headset, pacing, angry. Then he looked up, straight toward us. My blood chilled. "He knows," I muttered. Before we could back off, headlights flashed through the trees. Another car. For a split second, I thought we were surrounded. But then I saw the emblem on the side. Sheriff's Department. Backup had arrived, full sirens this time. The forest exploded into chaos. "Hands in the air!" an officer shouted. The Falcon Ridge men froze. One tried to reach for his radio, but the red dots of 3 rifles landed on his chest. Within seconds, they were on the ground, cuffed, shouting about property rights and government authorization. I stepped into the open, staring right at Dross. He smirked, even in cuffs. "You don't get it, Hale. You think you won tonight, but you're just one man." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But one man with truth is louder than an army with lies." The sheriff arrived, breathing hard, eyes narrowing as he saw the setup. "We'll take it from here," he said. "Looks like your cameras weren't the only ones running." As they dragged Dross toward the cruiser, he glanced back one last time. "You should have stayed gone," he hissed. I smiled faintly. "I fought for this land once in uniform," I said, voice steady. "Now I fight for it as a man. Either way, I don't lose ground." The sheriff gave me a nod. "You've got friends in this county now." By sunset, the camp was dismantled, the evidence tagged, and Falcon Ridge's trucks towed out under police escort. I stood by my porch, the sky burning orange behind the trees, and watched peace slowly return to my cabin. Later that night, I checked the cameras one last time. Every feed was clear, every lock secure. I turned off the lights, sat by the window, and let the quiet settle back in. Then I whispered to the empty woods, half a warning, half a promise. Next time someone tries to take what's mine, they'll find out I don't just own this land, I protect it. And somewhere deep in the dark, a hawk cried, a sound of freedom, of justice, and of a man who refused to be pushed off his own ground ever again.